Hello, everyone. This will be phase 4 of my What If Marvel Still Had the Rights to All of Their Characters, so that being Spider Man, the X Men, Fantastic Four, etc. Now, without further delay, let's begin. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4 will be the first show of phase 4, and it'll roughly stay the same. What better movie to start the saga off with than The Amazing Spider Man 4? And due to real life events, Phase 4 will still be released in 2021. And the way I would start this movie would be similar to Spider Man 2 PS5, in which we would be in a scene that would be the jungle, and we would pan down and we would see none other than Kraven the Hunter, who appears to be on the hunt for somebody. And his introduction would be the same as it was in the Spider-Man 2 game, but we would see a figure approach Kraven. We won't see the figure's face, and Kraven is wondering who this guy must be. And so the figure would show Kraven a tablet in which would showcase footage of Spider-Man swinging through New York and stopping crime. Kraven would be intrigued and interested as he feels as if he's at the peak of his abilities and he wants to challenge the strongest foe he can find, in which the figure that's being presented to him seems like a suitable challenge for Kraven the Hunter. And so the figure would then state that if you deal with him, you'll be paid handsomely. Kraven would then scoff and say that the money doesn't matter to him, but the challenge presented to him does intrigue him, and he will be making his way to America so he can meet this so-called Spider-Man and claim him as one of his prey. The scene would linger on, building up hype, until we would abruptly cut into the title card, and which would be followed up by the bustling streets of New York, where we would see chaos and mayhem arriving at the streets, and we would see Shocker, who is blasting away cars with his shock gauntlets, and we would peer up into the sky where we would see Spider-Man swinging down and land on a car next to Shocker. Spider-Man would remark, "Oh, come on, Herman, I thought you were on rehab." Herman would then remark back that rehab doesn't pay the bills, and then would use his shock gauntlets to aim towards Spider-Man. Spider-Man would dodge and crack a couple more jokes before engaging with a fight with Shocker. Shocker would then get a lucky shot and punch Spider-Man, sending him flying towards a building. Spider-Man would then leap out of that building and use one of the sewer lids to debilitate Shocker's gauntlets. This would work, and leaving Spider-Man with the opportunity to knock out Shocker and unmasking him, revealing Herman Schultz. Spider-Man would then web Shocker up, leaving him for the police to handle, and swing away. While Spider-Man is swinging away, he would talk to himself, saying how at least the world is still relatively the same after the Skrull invasion, and that even though the Skrulls tried to take over the government, he was glad that he, along with the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four, were able to stop them. And Spider-Man would stop at a top of a building, where he would also say how he can't believe that Norman got off scot-free, saying that he's been kidnapped by terrorists. What a load of bullshit. Spider-Man tried to out Norman as the Green Goblin, but no one really believed him, as Norman was seen as the hero who stopped the Skrull invasion, and it was Spider-Man's word against his. Spider-Man also would say how he wonders how Harry would feel about the situation, given how everyone thought Norman was dead for 5 years, and suddenly he just pops back up and appears in the right place at the right time. Even Tony Stark, who Peter told about the Brooklyn Bridge incident, tried to defend Spider-Man's claims, but the masses were still critical. Some would even suggest that Tony Stark might be doing this as a way to leech off of Norman Osborn, since Tony Stark isn't in the spotlight for once. After Norman stabs himself with his glider, Spider-Man removed the Goblin armor, which now at this point in time he knows was a stupid idea. So with no link to the Green Goblin and Norman Osborn was essentially a free man, which enraged Spider-Man because this was the man who killed his girlfriend the love of his life, and he's just getting away with a pat on the back. All of this anger is just building up inside of Spider-Man, and we would see him clenching his fists in rage. That would be until he gets a call from Dr. Kurt Connors, who at this point has been long released from jail, as in my version of The Amazing Spider-Man, he didn't try to turn the whole city into lizards. And so Dr. Connors would call Peter to invite him to his lab, and Peter would agree, wanting to check up on the doctor. And so Peter would arrive at Dr. Connors' lab, and Dr. Connors would greet him, and Peter would ask what the doctor wanted to talk about. Dr. Connors would say that he knows that Peter has been feeling angry ever since the whole Norman fiasco, and actually wanted to offer his help as he discovered a secret Oscorp facility that's long been abandoned for years, and he discovered it by searching through his old files. He wanted to tell Peter this because this abandoned Oscorp facility could actually have some evidence proving Norman as the Green Goblin. Peter would be intrigued and would agree to go to this old facility. And so Peter would suit up as Spider-Man, and Dr. Connors would give him the location. And after a while, Spider-Man would arrive at the abandoned Oscorp lab, and he would look around in search of any evidence that could indict Norman as the Green Goblin. And it is a long search until he comes across a strange tube that contains a mysterious black substance. Spider-Man would open this tube in feeling curious about what this could be. The black substance inside would appear stagnant and would not move one bit. Spider-Man would turn around and continue his search. Unbeknownst to him, the black substance would then begin to move and start to slither out of the tube, making its way to the bottom of Spider-Man's foot. Spider-Man would be unaware of this and would continue to search the lab, and after a long search, it would appear that he's found no evidence and would leave the abandoned Oscorp site. Spider-Man would swing back to the city and would contemplate to himself on how that was basically all just a big waste of time, until all of a sudden his spider sense would go off and Spider-Man would catch a knife that was aimed at his head. Spider-Man is looking around to see who threw the weapon, and his eyes would meet a certain figure who jumped down behind him, and that figure would appear to be Kraven. Spider-Man asked who the hell is he, and Kraven would merely say that he is the one that's going to kill him, stating it as if it was a simple fact, like someone saying the sky is blue. Spider-Man wouldn't take this seriously and would say that he isn't the first schmuck that'll say he'll kill him, and he isn't the last either. And so Spider-Man would then proceed to try and whap Kraven's face, but Kraven would dodge and appear in front of Spider-Man in an instant, punching him in the nose. Spider-Man would reel back, surprised at how fast Kraven is. And so Spider-Man and Kraven would begin to battle, Spider-Man getting a few hits in, and would reel back his fist to punch Kraven, but Kraven would catch that fist and would say, "You're fast, boy." Kraven would deck Spider-Man across the face. "But I'm faster." What follows is an onslaught where Kraven is beating the crap out of Spider-Man, hitting Spider-Man's face, stomach, and chin several times. Spider-Man will try to defend himself, but Kraven is too fast and experienced. Plus, he's fighting with the intent to kill. And so Kraven would finish off the combo, kicking Spider-Man away. Spider-Man is seen bloodied and battered, and Kraven would slowly walk up to him, holding a spear. Kraven would then lift up the spear and aim it at Spider-Man's chest. And the screen would cut to black, where we would hear the sound of metal piercing flesh. We would cut to Mary Jane Watson, who is currently helping Aunt May with some errands. Mary Jane would then tell May that she wonders where Peter is, as he was supposed to be with them by now. May would reassure MJ, saying that Peter is often late to things, and he'll be arriving shortly. May would also proceed to tease MJ on how worried she is for Peter. MJ would blush, saying that they're just friends, but May would give a knowing and slightly teasing smile. We would cut to Spider-Man, who appears to just be waking up, and you would see that he appears to be in a dark room. Spider-Man is dazed and confused, but remember what happened before he blacked out, and Spider-Man would feel around his surroundings before deducting that he must be inside of a coffin, and that means Kraven buried him alive. And so Spider-Man would try his best to break free, but the dirt from above was covering the wooden lid of the coffin, making it almost as hard as concrete. Spider-Man would try his best, but he doesn't manage to break free, and he begins to ponder and think about his life up until that point. He would think about his parents, Uncle Ben, Captain Stacy, Gwen. He would then think about the people that he has in his life right now: Aunt May, Harry, Mary Jane. The black substance from before would proceed to climb onto Spider-Man, enveloping him. This, along with the emotional boost providing Spider-Man, would proceed to burst out of the coffin and would proceed to climb his way above the grave that was meant for him. But now, Spider-Man appears to be dressed in a black and white version of his original suit, minus the web patterns. Spider-Man would be confused for a second, but not before realizing that there's something more important that needs to be done, and that he needs to find Kraven. We would see Kraven in a penthouse where he is seen talking with the same figure at the start of the movie. Kraven would collect his money and would tell the figure that he expected much more from one of America's heroes. Kraven would then leave and is seen walking to the jet that will take him back to Africa, in which he is none other confronted by Spider-Man, who leaps in front of him before he can enter the jet. Kraven is confused as he knows he just killed Spider-Man and is wondering why he's dressed in all black. Spider-Man would tell Kraven to shut it and that they need to finish things now. And by the way, I'd have Kraven's abilities be due to many experiments as well as leaves from the Black Panther herbs. So that's why he appears to be more powerful in this version. And so Kraven and Spider-Man would dash at each other, resulting in a big climactic fight in which Spider-Man is putting up much more of a fight this time. Kraven appears to be getting overwhelmed, and Spider-Man would proceed to viciously assault Kraven with a flurry of attacks, with Spider-Man finishing it off with an uppercut to the chin, sending Kraven flying. Spider-Man would then appear to Kraven and tell him who is the one that sent him. Kraven would say that he'll never reveal his clients, and Spider-Man would proceed to knock him out and send him to the police. And so we would cut to a couple days later, where Peter arrives at MJ's house, and MJ opens the door to find Peter and would berate him on how he hasn't contacted her for days and that she was getting worried about him. Peter would then reassure MJ that he's fine and would actually tell MJ that he needs to tell her something. And so Peter would close the door. MJ would ask Peter, "What's this about?" And Peter would reveal to MJ that he is Spider-Man, zipping down his hoodie, revealing the white spider emblem on his chest. MJ would be silent, and Peter would continue on saying that he didn't know how to tell her before, but after the incident with Kraven, Peter realizes that he isn't invincible, and one of these goons might actually be able to do him in one day. And so he wants to tell MJ that before that can happen, he wanted to let her know his secret. MJ would still be silent, and Peter would begin to get nervous until Mary Jane would reveal that she's known all this time. Peter's face would drop and ask her when did she know. Mary Jane would tell Peter that she's had a feeling he's been hiding something. Plus, Peter isn't very good with keeping secrets. Peter would scratch his head a bit flustered until MJ would proceed to kiss him. Peter would be shocked at first and a bit hesitant, but then would later return the kiss, and then MJ would break away, remarking that since now that they're telling their secrets, she might as well reveal her as well. Peter and Mary Jane would proceed to kiss again, that is, until we would hear sirens in the distance, and Peter and MJ would break away. Peter would look out the window to see Shocker as well as Rhino causing havoc. Peter would look back at MJ, and MJ would tell him, "Go get him, Tiger." And with a smile, Peter would leap out of the window donning his black Spider-Man suit and swinging towards the action. We would get a post-credit scene of Kraven being transported into a cell, and he would be taken into a room where we would see the same figure from the start of the movie appearing before him. Kraven would ask him what the hell is he doing here. The figure would ask Kraven how would he like to be a part of a special team. Kraven would be confused and would ask what kinds of team. And we would see the figure's face, revealing Kingpin. Kingpin would then say, a team made for revenge. The next movie will be X-Men Hell to Pay, which I'll be stealing the title off that animated Suicide Squad movie since I think it's pretty cool, and I'm having the villains of this movie be the Hellfire Club, so I think that'd be pretty accurate. The movie would start with the X-Men seen training in the Danger Room, where we would see Wolverine and Colossus teaming up to take down robots, as well as Cyclops and Storm using their respective abilities. Nightcrawler is teleporting throughout the field, debilitating as many robots as he can. Gambit and Rogue are also teaming up, taking some interest in each other. Iceman is seen freezing robots with his powers, along with the X-Men's new recruit, Kitty Pryde, who phases through the robots and helping in defeating them. And so we would cut to Professor X talking with Beast, both of whom are discussing the recent Skrull invasion and what effect that had on the world, until all of a sudden, two figures would appear right in front of Professor X and Beast, one man and one woman. The alarm would sound, and the X-Men would burst through the door, and the professor would ask who are these intruders, and that man would introduce himself as Sebastian Shaw, remarking how he's a fan of the X-Men and their efforts, and would invite them to come visit his estate, in which he will be hosting a gala. The woman introduces herself as Emma Frost, and would add on saying that this particular gala would be mutant exclusive, also prestigious. And so the two figures would leave, leaving the X-Men to ponder on what just happened. The professor would be intrigued, as he was not aware of these two mutants' existence. And so he would ask the X-Men to go to the gala, just as a way to investigate, to make sure these mutants aren't up to anything funny, and to see if their intentions are good or bad. And so the evening would come, and we would see each of the members of the X-Men dressed in fancy outfits. And Wolverine in particular is not really a fan of such, but Cyclops manages to talk him into it. And so the X-Men would reach the Sebastian Shaw mansion, where they will be greeted by Emma Frost, who lets the X-Men in and would converse with them on how it is a great honor that they are in this mansion, as they don't just invite anyone. Logan would scoff and Storm would hit him in the arm. Emma Frost would then reveal that they have been watching the X-Men for a while and know about the passing of two of their members, Angel and Jean Grey. Cyclops would tell her to get to the point, in which Emma would stare at him for a bit, but then continue on, saying that the purpose of their organization is to ensure the safety of mutants and to make sure that no mutant is confronted with prejudice. The same ideal goals that Charles Xavier has. And so Emma Frost would enter a dining hall in which all the X-Men and as well as the other members of the organization would sit down around the table. And Sebastian Shaw would tap his wine glass with a fork and would introduce himself further to the X-Men, and stating how their idea is to ensure the safety of mutant kind, and with the X-Men's help, that idea might be able to come through fruition. Kitty Pryde would excuse herself and leave the dining room, and Sebastian Shaw would continue on talking about his plans, and we would cut to Kitty Pryde investigating the mansion, and she would phase through the walls looking for any evidence that could prove that this organization is up to something sketchy, as Professor X ordered her to look around the mansion, as he fears that this organization could have the same ideals as Magneto and the Brotherhood, and he didn't want to take any chances. So Kitty would search around the mansion for a while undetected, until she stumbles across a mysterious room in which she looks around and finds a set of blueprints that would reveal schematics titled the Sentinel Project, with a name that appears to be Boulevard Trask at the bottom, and it would be a schematics for robots that were originally designed to hunt mutants that were reprogrammed into killing humans. Kitty Pryde would see this and would grab the schematics and inform her team. That is until Emma Frost would appear right in the doorway in front of her and knocks her out using her powers of telepathy. We would cut to Sebastian Shaw still explaining his plans, and Wolverine would start to get bored and yawn loudly, which would annoy the Hellfire Club members such as Donald Pierce and Black Bishop. Colossus would start to get worried and offer to look for Kitty as she's been gone for a while now. But before Colossus can leave, Emma Frost would walk into a room and reassure Colossus that Kitty is fine and that she just got lost. Colossus wouldn't buy this and he would try to move past Emma, but she remains persistent and won't let Colossus leave. And that is when Cyclops starts to get suspicious and he would question Sebastian Shaw on what his true motives are. Sebastian Shaw would then look at Cyclops for more than a second before revealing that they just want what's best for mutant kind and to subjugate the humans in a way where they can't harm mutants anymore. And so that would be the last straw. And Cyclops would say that they have all the evidence they need and that they're leaving now. Sebastian Shaw would counter saying that, oh no, the X-Men aren't leaving until they make a decision. They are either with them or against them. And so the tensions would rise, with both of Donald Pierce and Black Bishop getting ready to attack. We would see Wolverine, who is next to a vase, and with a sly smile, he nudges his elbow just enough for the vase to fall into the floor and break in pieces. Wolverine would then look back at Sebastian Shaw. Oops. This will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and Sebastian Shaw would blast away Wolverine using his energy powers. This would then result in the X-Men clashing with the Hellfire Club, and Sebastian Shaw would call in his minions to help aid the Hellfire Club in the battle, and so it is a grueling fight. Donald Pierce would tackle Wolverine and would proceed to punch him in the face multiple times until getting pulled off by Colossus, who clobbers Pierce. Storm would proceed to fight Black Bishop, who expands his body to unnatural sizes and rushes at Storm, who uses her lightning powers to shock him away, but it does no damage, as Black Bishop proceeds to body slam her into a wall. This would then lead into Iceman using his powers to try and freeze the Bishop, but it is no use, as the Bishop seems to be a tank, and he would dart towards Iceman before being stopped by Beast, who the Bishop manages to punch away, still charging at Iceman, and so Iceman would proceed to clash with the Bishop. Gambit and Rogue would handle Sebastian Shaw's minions, as Cyclops would use his optic lasers to blast Sebastian Shaw. Sebastian Shaw would counter this using his energy powers, and both of them would have a tug-of-war of beams. That is until Emma Frost would intervene and enter Cyclops' mind, where she would find many images of a certain red-headed girl. And so the fighting would persist until Nightcrawler would teleport across the mansion, debilitating any Hellfire Club members, and would proceed to teleport each of the X-Men away from the mansion and back into their X-Mansion. The X-Men, now back at the X-Mansion, would proceed to be worried about Kitty Pryde, as she seems to be still trapped in Sebastian Shaw's mansion. And so with the help of Professor X, they managed to get a read on Kitty Pryde's location and how she's doing at the moment, and she appears to be trapped in what seems to be a dungeon of sorts, and this would enrage Colossus as those bastards have her held hostage. And so the X-Men would head back to the Sebastian Shaw estate, where they are more prepared this time, and Sebastian Shaw would unleash prototype Sentinels, who will not be the final version of the Sentinel project, but just as beta tests, just to see if they're really optional or not. And so this would be the X-Men's first time dealing with the Sentinels, and they would proceed to get overwhelmed as they never felt with anything like this before. And the Sentinels would slowly but surely defeat each of the X-Men members, and the X-Men would be imprisoned and a few hours would go by until someone would eventually enter the dungeon, and that someone would appear to be Emma Frost. The team would tense up, but Emma would appear to help in freeing them and helping them escape. Cyclops in particular would ask why the hell is Emma Frost helping them, and Emma would reveal that she went through Cyclops' mind and was indulged in how true her feelings was for this particular girl. And you would see some romantic tension between both of Cyclops and Emma Frost, but the scene would then later shift into Sebastian Shaw, who is still in the mansion, but he would be surprised by the X-Men and would be enraged at Emma Frost's betrayal. And so the battle would pursue with X-Men as well as Emma Frost versus Sebastian Shaw, Donald Pierce, Black Bishop, and the Sentinels. And this time, the X-Men are much more prepared and have fought the Sentinels now, so they know what to expect. And so the battles would be different, and the X-Men would proceed to come out on top, defeating Sebastian Shaw and his prototype Sentinels. And so the X-Men, after this triumph, would return back to the X-Mansion. And we would see Wolverine confronting Cyclops, saying that being part of this team was fun, but for right now, he needs to go on his own journey. Cyclops would respect this and proceed to shake Logan's hand, and Logan would depart from the X-Men. Storm would share the sentiment and remarking on how this battle would seem to never end, and she would also depart from the X-Men, going on her own way. And so now the entire X-Men roster would consist of Cyclops, Emma Frost, Kitty Pryde, Iceman, Beast, Gambit, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and Rogue. And so we would get a post-credit scene showing the destroyed Shaw estate, where we would see Sebastian Shaw slowly crawling out of the wreckage, and he would look up to see Magneto descending upon him. And so Magneto would land and look down at Sebastian Shaw with disgust. Magneto would say that he had better have a good reason for calling him, as he was in the middle of something important. Sebastian Shaw would then grab Magneto by the ankle and beg him for his help in taking revenge on the X-Men for ruining him. Magneto would shake away Sebastian Shaw's hands and would kneel down and would proceed to say that the X-Men are no longer of interest to him anymore, as he has more important matters to deal with in maintaining his new land. Sebastian Shaw would ask what kind of land, and Magneto would begin to smile before saying, the most beautiful lands in all of the world, an island dedicated to mutants, the island known as Genosha. The next movie following will be The Wolverine 2, which would basically be a better version of the Wolverine movie that released in 2013 in the real world. And so in this movie, we would see Logan travel to Japan after his departure from the X-Men, where he would still meet Yukio, and Silver Samurai will still be the main villain, as well as Viper, who will be revealed to have some ties to Hydra in this movie. Hydra not being completely dead, but still just barely surviving. I'd also have Lady Deathstrike be featured in this movie as another antagonist for Logan to beat. And so the movie wouldn't end with Wolverine losing his claws. He'll just find another way to beat Silver Samurai. And besides those changes, the movie would basically be the same. The next project plans will be Daredevil Season 3. This season I thought was pretty good and would relatively stay the same. And now the movie following will be Guardians of the Galaxy, in which, similar to Daredevil, it would relatively stay the same, and this would actually be the first appearance of Thanos as well as the Power Stone. And if there was anything I would change, I'd make Ronan appear as more intimidating and powerful, but besides that, this movie would basically be the same. Following up this movie will be Doctor Doom, which would actually be the first MCU movie that would be following a villain as the main character. And so the movie would start with basically a recap of Doctor Doom's origin, of him being born to a gypsy woman who had certain consorts with devils, which ultimately led her into being murdered by her clan members. The scene would cut into a young Victor who is then seen traveling with his father in the cold wilderness, but due to the extreme temperatures, his father would freeze to death, still clutching Victor in his arms. Then the scene would then shift into a more grown-up Victor who is seen killing a man for survival. And the scene would shift into a now more mature and 18-year-old Victor who gets an invitation from a certain school who sees his talents and wants him to enroll in their program. It was in this school where he meets a young Reed Richards, in which the two would ultimately, almost instantly, have a rivalry with one another, trying to one-up each other. It wasn't until the fateful day in which Victor, due to the desperation of trying to save his mother, would proceed to make a machine in which would allow him to travel through hell to rescue his mother. Reed would say how this isn't a good idea, but Victor would ignore him, seeing Reed as jealous, until the machine would ultimately malfunction and thus scarring Victor's face for life, until he would then leave the university and travel to the mountains, in which he would be trained by monks and have a new suit forged. And with this suit, he would travel back to his home country of Latveria, where he would proceed to take over the country and rule as its new leader. The scene would then shift into the 1960s, where we would see Doom building another device, in which he is confronted by none other than the Fantastic Four, who would proceed to battle Doom, but that battle would ultimately lead into the machine malfunctioning, and thus sending everyone into a plane of existence known as the negative zone. In this, we would see how Doom would adapt to the negative zone throughout the years, until it was Reed who manages to get everyone out of the negative zone, and Doom would escape back to his home country of Latveria, in which he would proceed to rule over and take over as its leader again. And we would finally cut into Doctor Doom in the present day, and we would see him sitting in his throne, pondering, in which he is still haunted by his mother's damnation, and he vows to find a way for her to return back to the lands of the living. And so Doom, further motivated by this, would proceed to depart from his country of Latveria temporarily and instill a Doombot in his place to rule over. And we would see him travel to the Sanctum Sanctorum, in which he would enlist the help of Doctor Strange in helping him find his mother. And so Doctor Strange would be reluctant at first, but he sees the determination in Doom's eyes and would begin to agree. And so both him and Doom would find a way to travel to Hell, in which they would try and locate Doom's mother's whereabouts. And I'd have this movie have sort of a God of War feel, in which it's basically a lot of mystic and magical stuff with a sense of adventure, basically. And we would see more of an insight of Doom's character and why he is the way he is. And so after some more dimension hopping, they finally stumble across Doom's mother's soul, in which they would also encounter the devil himself, known as Mephisto, in which Mephisto would proceed to battle Doom and Strange. And I'd have this battle pretty much be the most fantastical one we've seen in the MCU, with lasers flying out of hands and people just punching each other and flying through rocks. I mean, come on, it's a superhero movie. Let's just make it a superhero movie. So it'll basically be similar to a DBZ fight, in which everything is just like happening all at the same time, and all of these magic users are basically going ham at each other. Like Mephisto will attempt to throw a fireball at Strange, but Strange would block using one of his magic shields. This would cause Mephisto to enlarge his fist and punch Strange away, sending him flying a dozen feet. And so Doom would attempt to assist and try and blast Mephisto away, but Mephisto would appear in front of Doom and tug at his cape and spin him around relentlessly before releasing, sending Doom flying through a dozen rocks. And so the battle would persist throughout the majority of the landscape of Hell, before it would finally end with Doom and Strange managing to subdue Mephisto, in which would allow Doom to claim his mother's soul, before his mother would then take manifestation and reveal herself as a true state. And in this scene, we would basically get like one of those cheesy scenes in which Doom would reunite with his mother, and his mother would say that her time on Earth is gone and that Doom would need to learn to move on. And so Doom, with a heavy heart, would let his mother go, and his mother's soul would drift into little particles and fly up into the air. And so Doom and Strange would manage to escape hell together, in which Doom would return back to Latveria with a new appreciation of life. The next movie of this phase will be Captain America, Serpent Society. And since Steve Rogers is still Captain America, he hasn't given up the mantle. He's still gonna be the main focus of this movie. And I'd have this movie be more of a suspense thriller in which we would see Captain America being confronted by this mysterious xenophobic group known as the Serpent Society. And I'd have the Serpent Society basically be Captain America's version of the Court of Owls, where we would see Captain America investigating this new group on the rise who appears to be having some ties with Hydra. And so we would see Cap looking for any evidence that he can find until he is then later confronted by the members of the Serpent Society, who we would know as King Cobra and Viper, who would proceed to have a battle with Captain America. And Captain America appears to have the upper hand until the other members of the Serpent Society would come forth and would proceed to overwhelm Captain America, knocking him out and taking him captive. And so Falcon would be suspicious of this and would enlist the help of Black Widow as well as Agent 13 in helping them find where Captain America is. And so the three of them would be basically investigating as many sites as they can in order to take down the Serpent Society as well as helping free Captain America. This movie would also feature Norman Osborn, as he is seen as the public's hero and he is also seen as one of the Serpent Society's main targets. I'd also have Winter Soldier be a part of this movie, as he would be sent by Norman Osborn to help take care of the Serpent Society, as well as Bucky, who still has his memory, would want to help Steve and would want to later apologize for his actions, even though he wasn't in control of them. And so we would cut to Steve, who is still being held captive by the Serpent Society, in which the Serpent Society would be playing certain mental games as a way to make Captain America lose his sanity and further prove their ideals. And of course, Falcon, Black Widow, Agent 13, as well as Winter Soldier would manage to break into the Serpent Society headquarters and would manage to free Captain America, which would lead into an ultimate final battle between Captain America, Falcon, Agent 13, Black Widow, Winter Soldier, and the Serpent Society. And it is a long-fought battle until Team Captain America manages to get the upper hand and subdue the Serpent Society. And now Captain America will be fighting King Cobra one-on-one. And it is a hard fight until Captain America would manage to get the upper hand and King Cobra would be on his knees, in which Captain America would choose to spare him and explain his ideals, as well as his hope for his country's better future. And we would see King Cobra start to sympathize with this, in which we would see a bit of glimmer in his eyes, as if he was willing to change his ways. Until all of a sudden, a missile would come flying past Captain America and aiming at King Cobra's head. The missile would connect, and King Cobra's head would be blown off, his body falling limply to the ground. Captain America would look on in shock and horror and would dart his head to see who shot that missile, until he would look up to see Iron Man. No, this suit looks different. And so the suit of armor would land down next to Captain America, and Cap would ask what the meaning of this was, and the armor would then lift up his mask, revealing Norman Osborn. And he would give Captain America a side smile. And he would remark that the meaning of this was how Captain America was too slow and that he had to get the job done himself. And so a couple of other soldiers would then enter the headquarters, and Norman Osborn would tell them to clean up the mess, in which they would. And so Norman would then walk around, mocking Cap a little on how poorly he seems to do his job, and that it's a miracle that the Avengers haven't turned this world upside down yet. And so before Norman can fly off, he would give one last word to Cap. And by the way, call me Iron Patriot. And so the suit of armor would fly off, leaving a startled and confused Cap. This scene is just to set up Norman Osborn, as he will be the Iron Patriot of his new Avengers team, which would be known as the Dark Avengers, which I'll have big plans for later on in this phase. And with that, I'll see you guys later.